Seth Kinney's fingerprints and DNA were never taken. Seth Kinney talked to Corporal Hancock 40 times or more. They supplied information back and forth. And he starts making you wonder about what's going on and why I'm called dishonest for raising the possibility that maybe Mr. Kinney was the source. Because he's pretty tight with law enforcement.
Yeah, he did.
In this case.
You're right.
Obviously. They don't do a prop search warrant
until
6 days after the incident. And that was Corporal Hancock.
No one here is going to get good jail time. Or a lot of jail time.
It's
all going to be under 5 years between everyone. Together.
They never asked the FBI to check
everyone together as one.
DNA.
It won't be more than 5 years.
And so
that's sad.
We will not know if Mr. Kinney's fingerprints or anybody else's would have ever appeared on those live rounds on set because they didn't get that evidence.
They already have his fingerprints, by the way.
Remind you a little bit about his testimony.
Because he's got an FFL. You automatically got to give fingerprints.
Revolver being single action, you have to cock it, and then every time you want to shoot it. He testified about breaking that firearm. They actually destroyed the firearm after testing that was approved by the sheriff by hitting that with a hammer. He talked about that you can't determine a live round from a picture. And that's the other point I think is important to consider when considering the picture analysis. Now, the Latin print examiner, examined various things, but she did not examine anything Seth Kinney-wise. There's no analysis on the cartridges from the prop cart, and found 8 FBI employee prints. Mr. Gillette, on the powder testing, only tested 11 rounds from Seth Kinney. Again, we know that he brought back 125 from the group that went to 1883. And I also want to remind you about 1883, some of those were Starline brass rounds. And some of those, he said, had silver primers. So when we get
because they're going to get good time.
Are Starline brass,
and they get probation.
And they have silver primers. It's a continuous chain that could have been traced.
Give Hannah a pass, jail her dad, maybe.
They'll read all the way to Seth Kinney, all the way back.
I feel like she did it on purpose.
But they did
or
not
she's just
do
fucking
that thorough
stupid. Either stupid or on purpose, because she didn't shake the bullets.
They have not ruled out. The dummies, again, I submit, this is another area of reasonable doubt.
Oh, don't read the chat. The chat's for live.
A dangerous mix of
I'm not live. I just realized
they were dangerous because it was impossible for the armor and
I can't wait to get to this part.
Hear and rattle all of the dummies, especially under pressure.
It's live today.
You saw there was a lot of wind
we've been pausing it
on the lapel. There's people running around. There's, I think at one point somebody said 200 people. There's all kinds of things going on. And despite that, Mr. Haig indicated in a quiet office he could not hear one of the dummies when it's rattled. That's dangerous because when you're trying to do it quickly, when there's a lot of noise, it may be a dummy.
Blinks are obvious.
You can't hear it rattle. Seth Kinney, again,
they look like they're smashed with
in this case that he always rattle tested his rounds.
They're smashed.
And he made sure they're dummies. He told you all that. Well, the problem,
like the end ain't lead. It's like smashed, like crimped.
And the rounds that came out of
looks like a butthole.
Round, if you remember, that was gunked. And
if the end of the bullet looks like a butthole,
that round had to be sent to the FBI to be broken apart and to be checked to see if it was live. So if he truly is that thorough and shaking,
it's closed, but it's got like one little tiny hole just to have some air, just like your
producers.
Butthole.
They had oversight over the budget team. They didn't know where the funds were set aside for the armor. They were on location for filming, and they were fined the statutory maximum by OSHA for managerial safety violations.
Wow.
Again,
that sucks.
OSHA found that the management team are the ones responsible. And yet we're here with Ms. Gutierrez-Reed, the person on trial for the felony offenses.
She might not get in trouble.
Sherilyn Schaefer was the medic on set. You recall she did not have chest seals, She, I think, was doing the best she could with the equipment that she had, but she didn't have the complete equipment to deal with the.
But you can't. The last sentence you said, I don't think you can do.
Also,
but everything else
she
you
never
can.
heard anyone call out use of a gun before the.
You can make people
shooting.
pay, and
Amy
you can
Mitchell,
do
I touched
prison.
on
But
this
I don't think you
earlier.
can.
Most important thing Miss Mitchell said was
If
that
you're on
it was not
probation,
in
you
the
can.
script for Baldwin
If you're on
to point
probation,
the
you can do all
firearm.
three of those.
That
But after
goes
probation,
directly
no.
to the element when you read the jury.
This lady
instructions
was
and you all go
crazy.
back in to deliberate.
She was
that
smart.
Goes to foreseeability, and whether or not anybody.
She
can
was on
foresee
Hannah's
the moment
ass.
Mr. Baldwin pointing the gun, using it as a pointer. He's up on the hill shooting after cut, and then he's shooting, pointing the gun when he's not supposed to in scenes. David Halls was the first assistant director, as you remember. He was in charge
he's guilty.
of overall safety. Now he got a misdemeanor.
Oh, he
6
already
months
pled.
unsupervised probation.
That's how.
Even though he was in charge of overall set safety, he never raised any concerns. And in fact, I think he said Hannah did a great job as armor. He indicated he did not hand the gun to Baldwin, but the sheriff contradicted this. So did Hannah, and so did Mr. Baldwin. And that was essentially Mr. Hall's testimony. Sarah Zachary, I remind you, she threw away rounds on set after the shooting, took items off the prop card. Now, she worked for Seth Kenney, and she texted and called him right after the shooting. One of her texts, she indicated she had said she was talking to Alec Baldwin and trying to keep her facts straight. She mentioned that she had loaded firearms on set. She picked up ammunition from Kenney at PDQ. I'll remind you in the testimony that Sarah Zachary and Hannah Gutierrez-Reed went to Kenney's place before production started, and he had given them ammunition, leathers, and firearms. So again, we don't know exactly what Mr. Kenney may have supplied to this set because it's not inventoried, it's not all invoiced. I also remind you about Sarah Zachary when you're considering her credibility and her testimony. She had the text where she wanted Hannah to go to jail, and she's given complete immunity. Seth Kenney, again, I mentioned this, he supplied the leathers, guns, and ammo before arrest began. He had no inventory system. And we attached some pictures to the right.
This is the whole court. This is everything that happened. This is everything that happened in those 8 days.
It was an absolute
10
mess.
days.
There was stored live ammo in the bathroom. And one of the things I think was important to remind you of is he actually called Joe Swanson and had a conversation with him. And after he gets off the call, his first words are, shit, shit, shit. And so that's something as an investigator you would think after he does that, maybe I should call Joe Swanson and see what's happening. See what that means. That reasonable doubt has not been ruled out. I went over this on the 1883 set, and he brought 125 rounds back. Mr. Carpenter, I want to remind you, he was the state's expert armorer.
This is the part I skipped.
One of the most important points he said was 2 is 1 and 1 is none. And here we didn't have a properly staffed armorer component to the set. Luke Haig, he said the live rounds on set were reloads. He could not hear the dummy rattle in a quiet office, and he said Mr. Baldwin violated basic safety rules. Karen Kuhn, you may remember, was the photographer. She said the armorer was checking guns before when she was present. And she also made a comment about Mr. Baldwin that on the day she was taking questions, I believe she said on the 21st, he told her to get out of his personal space and said something in a manner that kind of goes along with how he was on the set.
I think Baldwin...
Mr. Souza was kind about it. He said he had a strong personality, but you can see it in the videos. And
I think Baldwin might have put a live round in there.
Rebecca Smith,
I'm trying to blame Hannah
about the tampering. She said that she hadn't used cocaine in 31 years. She saw a baggie inside a baggie for approximately 5 seconds. She didn't know if it was cocaine or meth or something else.
This is a good lawyer, I guess.
She admitted at the end she was guessing. And we also know that the substance in the baggie was never tested. And so the only evidence you have of narcotics in this case is a guess. Now, Ms. Morrissey in her closing indicated that, well, of course we don't have the evidence. The whole thing is throwing it away. Well, you have to prove first that it was evidence. So in a normal tampering case, when, let's say, a firearm's thrown away, and we know a firearm was used, and somebody throws a firearm away, we know that was a firearm. So we know that would be evidence in a case involving a shooting. Here, we have an unknown substance. Again, they have to rule out all of the reasonable doubt by that. It's not enough to say it's probably something under a criminal standard. It's probably cocaine in that bag because Ms. Smith says it is. If it even happened, we don't even know this happened. The government hasn't established that except through her testimony. We don't know if there was a bag. We don't know if this actually was passed. And that's their burden.
That's a good lawyer.
Let's say it did happen. That you believe it did happen.
What a surprise.
It's not enough to say what was probably in that bag. They have the burden to rule it out beyond a reasonable doubt that it couldn't have been anything else. And she's already calling it in her testimony potentially multiple substances. Cocaine, methamphetamine, or possibly something else. So she's not even certain about what it is. Without a test, without something presumptive to tell you on a test, there's no way of telling what was in that bag. And it's not enough in a criminal case. OSHA we talked about in detail, and I just want to remind you the root cause they found, they attributed all the responsibility for safety issues to management.
Whoa.
Mr. Elliott, he was defense expert investigator. He had an extensive law enforcement experience, if you recall, in APD and military. One of his big points was Mr. Baldwin was not segregated at the beginning, even though he was the known shooter.
I made it the fuck
Hannah
up.
was segregated right away. Again, they zeroed in on her. And
you guys believe me the whole time?
Have her
Idiots.
identified. He indicated there was 20 or so key witnesses not identified and segregated. And the problem with that is they can get their stories together and they can change their stories. They can have their memories altered. We know this happened in this case because after the incident, Mr. Baldwin is talking to Sarah Zachary. He's texting and talking to her. Seth Kenny's talking to Sarah Zachary. Mr. Halls is talking to Baldwin after. And so we don't have all the information they're talking about, but we do know they're coordinating, they're talking. The only one not in that group was Hannah. And again, this was the idea. We've got to circle the wagons, and we've got to pick out the person that's going to take the fall for everything that's happened here. That's Hannah. That's who they got. Law enforcement failed to follow up on the origin of the live rounds, and their delayed search warrants caused problems with missing evidence. PJ Pesh testified just this morning. He had said, like everybody else, he's never seen in 35 years an armor split duties with props. It's not possible for one person to keep track of so many firearms. And he indicated it's important to give the armor adequate time and resources, which OSHA said as well. She was not given that to do her job.
Yep.
I want to talk to you about the law that the judge instructed you on, and that is the law. What the judge told you about is what we have to follow in terms of evaluating this. The law presumes the defendant to be innocent. The burden is always on the state to prove guilt beyond a reasonable doubt.
I don't know how they did it.
A reasonable doubt is a doubt based upon
they talked to everyone one by one.
The kind of doubt that would make a reasonable person
hesitate to
act in the graver and more important affairs of life. A doubt based on reason.
No one went to jail.
So what the government has to do is rule out.
Because they can't prove anything.
Every reasonable doubt
you need proof.
Have based on reason and common sense. Or in this country, we don't convict people. That's the standard. And again, I go back to where I started at the beginning. If they didn't rule out the reasonable doubt on Miss Zachary throwing away the rounds, that is always going to be there. Because their theory based on you can identify these pictures and we know exactly what was on the set and what remained on the set, and we will never know that because some of them were thrown away. And we didn't get all of Seth Kinney's rounds. We're never going to know that.
Yeah, I don't know. They just interviewed everyone.
Other areas of reasonable doubt, I've gone over the top 2, top 3. The prop cart was tampered with.
Look at this.
Right after the incident, another individual moved it. Now, Lieutenant Benavides said he had eyes on the entire time. But if you saw that video, you can make up your mind what you believe. Ladies and gentlemen, his camera appeared to be pointed right into the vehicle, and the individual getting the cart was way off in the other direction. He said he had his head turned. But you all can decide what you think about that. The prop cart, there was unquestionably items taken from it. We don't know exactly what those are. That is another area of reasonable doubt that the government has not ruled out. You've had witnesses say throughout the trial you can't tell live ammo from a picture. And the reason is that the FBI said it has to be disassembled and you have to open it up because there's powder in it. If there's not powder in it, then it's not live. OSHA stated the root cause of all safety failures was management. OMI ruled this to be an accident, not a homicide. You heard
because it was an accident. It was an accident, bro. That's why.
To provide oxygen to Helena.
Just like in a car accident, no one gets in trouble.
A situation in this case where multiple lawsuits have been filed, and you can evaluate their testimony, those people who have filed lawsuits, with care and caution.
It's not murder yet.
Because they've got an interest, potentially, in what's happening in this case by being involved in lawsuits.
They got to have a motive and all that. And she's not even being charged for murder.
You're going to have that instruction when you go back. That is the
involuntary manslaughter
that Her Honor has read to you. She's given you the law on this. I want to focus you on a couple key points.
The prosecutor will tell you what she's being charged for next.
Elements beyond a
you stick around.
Doubt. The elements are the numbered items.
Or get to hear it without the ads.
If you all have reasonable doubts on any of these elements, Hannah cannot be convicted. And I want to focus you in on element 3, that Hannah acted with a willful disregard.
This is important because he can only talk once, she can talk twice. She already talked and she's going to talk again.
And the idea that if somebody doesn't know, I mean, that could be the same thing with a nurse on trial for involuntary manslaughter, but if she doesn't know,
that's what she has.
The drug was mislabeled, you cannot hold her criminally accountable for something like that.
That's why she's only getting 3 years.
And then if no one knew there
you
were
do good
rounds.
time, 1 year, and then Baldwin same
thing. So
thing.
she did not act willfully
2 years.
in anything that happened that day. In loading the firearm, this was another day everybody thought on set. Loading the firearms, running to different things, doing the duties. Nobody's calling her back in for the blocking scene. Mr. Baldwin's doing something on his own. Nobody in the wildest dreams thought there was a live round. And because of that, the next element is that Hannah Gutierrez Reed Act caused the death. I submit to you that
this is what I think sometimes, or Baldwin.
Her to pass was Mr. Baldwin going off script and pointing the weapon. Now, he didn't know there was a live round in there either. He didn't know.
How do you know that?
Again, he's in the same position that nobody knew there was ever going to be a live round on that set. But the only ultimate act is
I thought he was going to say something totally different.
Ms. Gutierrez wasn't in the church.
And blame
she didn't
Alec.
point that weapon. She didn't pull it. Nobody called her back in. And because of that, those two elements, I submit to you, have not been proven on involuntary manslaughter. And they have to be. The government has to resolve all your reasonable doubts about that, or they don't. We cannot convict. Mental state and willful disregard, and that is going to be in your instructions. For you to find the defendant acted negligently in this case, you must find that the defendant acted with willful disregard. And so again, that's the terminology. is willful disregard. You're also going to be instructed, the court instructed you, Her Honor, on negligent use of a firearm. And that is a lesser included offense of the involuntary manslaughter. So when you go back and deliberate, you will have this in front of you as well, whether Ms. Gutierrez-Reed endangered the safety of another by handling or using a firearm in a negligent manner. And again, the language is acted with willful disregard.
That's another crime
That's
she
what
might
has
be
to
convicted
proven
of. She should get that.
charge
She should get that for sure.
For you to resolve all of your reasonable
She should get
doubts.
that for sure.
Tampering with evidence, I think this is a real stretch.
Her.
It is a real
The
stretch.
prosecution
And
proved
when
that
you
she
talk
brought
about
some
guessing,
live rounds to the set.
This one, they have to prove the defendant hid a bag of cocaine. Well, the only witness they have to it said it was either cocaine or meth or something else. So just by the testimony alone, the beginning of that, you can't, there's no way of knowing it was a bag of cocaine.
I think so,
It's
yeah.
just impossible.
Unless there's some type of
There
doubt
has to
that
be reasonable doubt on that by the government's own witness. Their only witness. No law enforcement testing, there's nobody else.
to me the rounds look like the same ones she brought.
Unproven in this case. And you don't even have to get to element 2 because element
But I
1
would charge
is
her
not
with
even
the
close
lesser
to
crime.
Haven't been proved beyond a reasonable
I
doubt.
wouldn't charge her for involuntary manslaughter. I would charge her
Proximate cause,
for
it's a
mishandling
legal
a
term,
weapon.
But it's
What did they
something
say? They said
is acted with
negligent use of a firearm, lesser included offense. So that's like a year max.
willful disregard.
So do 6 months.
Their only witness.
And then she got tampering
no
with
law enforcement
evidence.
testing. There's nobody else. This is absolutely unproven in this case.
That's stupid. She shouldn't have got that. I believe
You
that's
don't even
that's
have to
bullshit.
get to element 2 because element 1.
But she's
is
gonna
not even
automatically.
close to
That's
having
automatically
been
she'll
proved
get
beyond
charged with that
reasonable
because
doubt.
that did happen. But it just sucks. 'Cause
Proximate cause, it's a legal term, but it's something the government has to prove as well. And this is where you get into that the passing was a foreseeable result of Hannah Gutierrez's act. The act was a significant cause of the death, and the language I want to focus you in on, in a natural and continuous chain of events uninterrupted by an outside event. What these mean, and these are the legal terminology, what it means
I'm
is
gonna make a case
that
idea.
what
I can
Hannah
hear the case,
Gutierrez did had to be a
and kinda
foreseeable
see it in
result. But
on the
again,
monitor,
the cause
but
to
I
the
won't
death.
be sitting down.
But
for that.
again, without her knowing that there was a live round, that's impossible to meet that standard. She did not have that knowledge, and there's no witness that came in here in this courtroom in 2 weeks to say she had that knowledge. Without it, nothing she did. She has that willful disregard because she just doesn't know. Now, was there an outside event as well? There was an outside event. There's 2 outside events. Whoever put the live round on set, and then Mr. Baldwin in the end going off script and doing what he did. Those are outside events outside of Miss Gutierrez-Reed's control that she didn't know was going to happen. That breaks any idea, and there's reasonable doubt that she had anything to do ultimately with Helena Hutchins' death. Miss Gutierrez-Reed was not a significant cause as a result of her death because of the reasons I've mentioned to you. Another instruction Her Honor gave you is that negligence of a third person, again I'm going to highlight the language, if it breaks the foreseeable chain of events. Again, the foreseeable chain of events on that set is you have dummy rounds, you have blank rounds, and then you have an orderly progression with how those are being used. Here we had a completely unforeseeable live round, 6 live rounds that were on set, nobody could foresee. And then we have Mr. Baldwin's action in the end. Those were both unforeseeable to Miss Gutierrez-Reed. The judge instructed you on, you all are the sole judge of the facts. You all are deciding the facts, ladies and gentlemen. And your verdict should not be based on speculation, guess, or conjecture. It goes back to the tampering charge. It goes back to some of the other aspects the government has told you. in this country, we can't decide and convict people on guesses. And that's a lot of what they've asked you to do in several areas, to guess, to assume, to speculate. It's not sufficient to convict people in this country to guess. It's not. And that's what they brought you and they've asked you to do on the tampering and other aspects of their charges. And that's not sufficient. Ladies and gentlemen, Hannah is not guilty on all the counts because of the law that Her Honor has given you. When you apply that law and you apply the standard of beyond a reasonable doubt, she could not anticipate what Baldwin would do. It was not in the script. It was not foreseeable. Management was responsible for safety failures and not Hannah. There's zero evidence of cocaine. There's no testing. And again, I go back to the idea that Hannah is a scapegoat for all the management failures. They do hope she gets convicted, so they're all exonerated. They can move forward. They can finish that movie like Mr. Sousa said they did and make their money.
Doesn't that... This is a good lawyer, I'm not gonna lie.
Told you, the buck always stops with production.
What do you mean enjoy the food? I'm bringing the food back here, dog. I'm cooking it and I'm bringing it back here.
From the top down.
I'm just cooking it.
And that's where the responsibility lies in this case. That's what OSHA said.
I got a stream to do, dog. You didn't leave, did you?
And that's also the truth. And the truth is important. Because
look at the toll!
For Helena,
63% guilty!
Does not mean injustice.
Oh, she's fucked.
Does not mean injustice for Hannah. It does not mean they get to steamroll her and they get to come in and spin their version of
What are you talking about?
And they get to call it truth. Because that's not truth. Truth is bringing you, ladies and gentlemen, everything they can. Justice is bringing you everything they can. Justice is not mocking theories that could come true, that might have been the case. Justice is not laughing in court during some of our exchanges. And you can evaluate that as to their credibility, whether that was professional, whether if she didn't take court seriously, did she take the investigation seriously? I submit she did not. And so they can't come in here with a straight face and mock us and criticize us and tell you they have given you enough to convict her behind a reasonable doubt, because they haven't. Thank you.
State's reply.
I'll begin while the gentlemen are setting up the Elmo for me. Hannah didn't know there was a live round on set. I agree. If Hannah knew there was a live round on set and she loaded it into a prop gun and it was used to kill Helena Hutchins, she wouldn't be charged with involuntary manslaughter. She'd be charged with second-degree murder. She'd be charged with first-degree depraved mind murder. This is an involuntary manslaughter charge because she didn't know there were live rounds on set, and the reason she didn't know was through her own negligence, her own recklessness, her own willful disregard for the safety of other people. That willful disregard, that lack of care for the safety of other people that you have seen throughout this trial It is shocking. For Mr. Bowles to come up to this podium and say it wasn't foreseeable that Alec Baldwin was going to go off script and pull the hammer and pull the trigger. He showed you a video of Alec Baldwin going off script. Alec Baldwin went off script.
This lady
Gutierrez knew it.
This lady's hammering it. I gotta rewind it here. I heard it all, but I want to hear it again.
She was there. Hannah Gutierrez knew
Just
that
in case you guys
Baldwin
missed it.
was loose. She knew it. She didn't do anything about it, even though it was her job. It was her job. It is her job to say to an A-list actor, if in fact that's what you want to call him, hey, you can't behave that way with those firearms. That is her job. That is what they pay her for. That is the job that she applied for. That is the job that she accepted. Foreseeability. You want to talk about off script? Just remember those videos of the stuntman. That's not within the script. She was there. She watched it. She knew these people would go off script. You know she didn't check the rounds. If she checked the rounds, they wouldn't have been floating around that movie set the entire time, undetected. Give you everything we've got. You have absolutely everything we have. This law enforcement team and this team of prosecutors have reviewed thousands and thousands and thousands of photos and thousands of videos. We have interviewed countless people, many of whom you didn't even hear from. We can't stay here forever. You have absolutely everything you need. One of the amazingly shocking things about this case to me has always been, and it's to detectives.
Yeah, I know. Isn't that crazy?
A defense attorney with his own agenda, no question, comes to her and says, it's Seth Kenney, it's Seth Kenney, it's Seth Kenney. That's his job. Okay? Let's make that clear. That's Mr. Bowles' job.
No, I agree. I like this
He
prosecutor.
gets Hannah's dad to say, it's Seth Kenney, it's Seth Kenney, it's Seth
But
Kenney.
I don't like
Rather
when
than
people go to
ignore
jail,
them,
though.
She gets a search
And I
warrant.
I don't like prosecutors in general.
She
but
took his speculative agenda.
I do believe that she's telling the
presented it
truth.
to a judge,
This lady
got
talking
a
right
search
now.
warrant, and searched that man's property. And oh my heavens, what did they find? They found exactly what Thel Reed said they would find. They found live ammunition with semi-wad cutter projectiles. You have everything you have. You have everything we have. You have everything you will ever need to convict her. This is 100% foreseeable. Hannah Gutierrez is not a scapegoat. Hannah Gutierrez is not being treated as a scapegoat. Mr. Halls was charged criminally. To his credit, he took an early plea and he got the benefit of that. Mr. Baldwin has now been indicted. Everyone with criminal culpability has been criminally charged in this case. She's not being scapegoated. She is being treated
That's
like
the truth.
everyone else.
Everyone's being charged.
She is not being given a break because she's a woman. She is not being given a break.
I
because
agree,
she's
even though I
young.
hate prosecutors.
Because that's not how the law works.
Sorry, sweetie. Yeah, I learned
Let me
learn
just
one day.
review my notes real quick. And
She hasn't cried the whole court day.
I am going to
I would've been
try
crying.
to speed this up for you.
She hasn't cried the whole
Please
time.
keep in mind, Mr. Bowles comes up to the podium and says Sarah Zachary threw rounds
Showing
away.
pictures of the dead
She
girl.
did. Obviously she did. She admitted it. She told law enforcement that she did it. And rather than try to prosecute her for tampering with evidence, for panicking and throwing some rounds away, she agreed to come in and testify, and her agreement is that she must testify truthfully. And she testified truthfully.
Yep.
Sarah's
accurate. Yep.
An inertia puller in evidence? Why we don't have a box of dummies that Ms. Gutierrez said she brought on set? She said she brought 2 boxes. We've only got 1. You want to know why?
You're making me hungry.
Because she went to the prop truck,
Look at that.
got access to it, took a bunch of gun belts, and a couple of boxes.
Dibby dibby. Oh, sidebar. He finally objected out loud.
Not a reasonable doubt.
And the
to
judge
cast suspicion on
took her
Seth
side.
Kinney. All investigative leads were exhausted.
I can't wait till they
He simply didn't do
the jury
anything
decides
wrong. You
the
want
verdict.
to talk about scapegoating? That's the guy that got scapegoated.
Yeah, fuck you.
The doubt must be reasonable.
Yeah,
and
they're all
I
guilty.
don't have to prove this case beyond all possible doubt. If that is what the law required, my heavens, we live in a world of infinite possibilities. The government would never be able to prove a case beyond all possible doubt. We'd have to have a video of absolutely everything that took place. It's not the standard, and it doesn't have to be the standard. So when you're back there and you're talking about doubt, make sure it's a reasonable one under this set of circumstances. You know, Mr. Bowles says to you, these production outfitters were just from one day. That's right. All that happened in one day. Imagine what all the other days were like. That was one day.
Wow. Wow.
Mr. Balls is right. The crew didn't believe there were live rounds on set. They believed that she was going to do her job. They believed that she did her job. This isn't Seth Kinney's responsibility to inventory rounds, although he did it. That wasn't his responsibility. Rust Productions didn't provide all of the dummy rounds to the set of this movie. You know from her own statements she brought 2 boxes on herself.
She brought
We're not living in an alternate reality.
She brought them. We're not living in an alternate reality.
All right.
She doesn't even look sad. I'll be sad.
I'll go through them relatively quickly.
If I was being charged and I wasn't, if I was innocent and I was being charged, I'd be crying.
To the jury deliberation,
and I would want to go on the stand.
Copy.
But she didn't want to do any of that.
We'll have a copy to reference. These are some of the instructions that are.
No, she's against the armor. That's the prosecutor. That's the state. She's trying to make her. She's guilty. That's the prosecutor. She's proving that girl brung live rounds on that set and got that little girl killed. And not only that little girl got killed, the bullet went through the little girl and hit another guy, and he got injured. And he can't work anymore.
Your verdict should not be
she is.
Based on sympathy or prejudice.
We can't
Sympathy or prejudice.
for these girls. We can't simp for these girls.
Oh.
No sympathy.
There we go. Thank you, Mr. Lewis.
Who's the guy? What guy?
So it can't be based on sympathy or prejudice.
The guy that got shot?
And for any of you who are feeling sympathetic because she's
No,
young
he didn't.
and
He has nothing to say.
Maybe inexperienced.
He wasn't a witness.
Although by her own statement to Detective Hancock, she
Oh,
told
wait.
you she wasn't.
He was a witness. He'll be in Alec Baldwin's trial. He'll be in Alec Baldwin's trial, which is coming in the summer. He wasn't a witness to this girl's stuff.
You all are on this jury because during voir dire you agreed to follow the law. And I will ask you to do it right now. If you had said during voir dire,
I don't know why he
can't
wasn't
follow
called.
the
Isn't that
law,
weird?
I feel too sympathetic.
Maybe he was called and I missed. I don't know.
And if you
I
can't
didn't-
follow the law, you can probably excuse yourselves.
But they recapped everything, so this is all recap.
I'm going to skip that one.
If the judge was making this decision,
You
we
must not
would
concern
know
yourselves
today.
with the consequences of your verdict.
But
That
the
is
jury's
law.
doing
That
it.
is the law that you agreed to follow. That is the law that you are required to follow.
Well, we'll see if she's guilty in a couple of seconds or days.
By handling or using a firearm in a negligent manner, there can be absolutely no doubt. That happened. Hannah Gutierrez should have known of the danger involved by her actions. Yeah, she knew.
She get charged with the
This was
second one for
completely
sure.
Foreseeable. She was trained in firearms. She knows what we all know. Guns can kill you. You gotta be really careful. Her act caused the death of Helena Hutchins.
Ooh. That's a statement.
12A is the alternative theory. And so let me explain to you that 12 and 12A are alternatives. You must make a decision about guilt or innocence unanimously to the count, not to the alternatives. So 6 of you can say, I think she's guilty of 12, but not 12A. Another 6 of you can say, we think she's guilty of 12A, but not 12. Done. You're done. Hannah Gutierrez loaded live ammunition into a firearm. Yes, she certainly did. She told the police she did. She failed to perform an adequate safety check of the ammunition.
Sorry, Hannah.
Of course.
Bye-bye.
You know that.
I did
She
my
didn't
2
do it
years
just
on
once.
probation. It
She did
sucks.
it numerous times.
Couldn't do any coke.
She acted with willful disregard for the safety of others, without question. So you are being presented with what's called a lesser included offense. And I will remind you the instructions that the judge read you at the beginning. Your first job is to see if you can agree on involuntary manslaughter. If you find her guilty of involuntary manslaughter on either alternative, you do not move on to this misdemeanor. It's done. If you find her not guilty of involuntary manslaughter, then you get to move on to the misdemeanor. You've heard a lot about that. I'll skip it. This is what we call a general criminal intent instruction, and I want to just make sure that you understand this instruction only applies to the tampering with evidence. It does not apply to the involuntary manslaughter because she is charged with negligent homicide.
I don't know.
Not intentional.
No, it's a felony. She'll never be able to own guns. If she gets convicted of this, she'll never be able to own a gun. Besides in
Very
Texas.
importantly,
And it's only
are
a
the
shotgun
proximate
inside her
cause
house.
Jury instructions. These jury instructions
This is a felony
are
charge.
what allows you to
She'll never
find
be able to own a
Ms.
gun after this.
Gutierrez guilty, even though Mr. Baldwin may have also been a significant cause of the
Or
death
be
of
around him.
Helena Hutchins. So
Once you get a
Let's go
felony, you
through
can't
it.
own guns.
the death
the
is
law.
a foreseeable result of Hannah Gutierrez placing a
Federal
live round
law.
into a firearm. Of course it was. The act of the defendant was a significant cause of the death of Helena Hutchins. The defendant's act was a significant cause of death if it was an act which, in a natural and continuous chain of events, uninterrupted by an outside event, resulted in the death, and without which the death would not have occurred.
Absolutely.
She brought a bunch of live rounds on set, accidentally, but negligently. She loaded one of them into a prop gun, and this was after they were loaded into Jensen Ackles' gun belt and Alec Baldwin's holster. And
So she loaded them
She-
twice.
told Dave Halls this is a cold gun. He told the crew it's a cold gun. At that point, everyone certainly assumed that there wasn't a live round.
It's a cold gun, yeah.
She knew
I'm
Baldwin
dead.
would go off script.
She knew Baldwin would
She
go
didn't
off
have
script.
prop duties to tend to.
Oh,
She
wow.
walked out. And even if she had been there,
If she
would
starts
have made a
crying, she's
difference,
guilty.
Because you have seen the incredible lack of control that
She hasn't cried in 10
exercised
days.
as the only
If she cries from a
person
sentence,
on the
she's
movie
guilty.
set in charge
But she
of
hasn't cried in
firearms.
10 days.
There is no intervening event. If you think the intervening event is that Baldwin manipulated the gun, that's the whole purpose of the prop. He's going to manipulate it. You saw a bunch of other actors do it. Very importantly, there may be more than one significant cause of death. If the acts of two or more persons significantly contribute to the cause of death, each act is a significant cause of death.
So
If
look
you
at
think
it.
Baldwin's act was a significant cause of death, that's okay. You can still convict her.
Damn. She's good. She's ruthless.
Jury instruction 20. If you find the negligence of a person other than the defendant was the only significant cause of death, or constitutes an intervening cause that breaks the foreseeable chain of events, the defendant is not guilty. Well, that's not this case. She brought the live rounds on set. She put a live round in a prop gun. That's the reason that Ms. Hutchins is dead. One of at least two reasons. I will again thank you very
she's
much
not
for
crying.
your time and for your attention. I know that this has been hard work for you folks. I will ask you to find Ms. Gutierrez guilty of involuntary manslaughter and tampering with evidence. And I will ask you to bring some justice to Helena Hutchins. Thank you.
All right, thank you.
Damn, that was powerful, guys.
Instruction number
Thank you for
22.
watching on
I will
YouTube.
now ask you to retire to the jury room to begin.
I'm gonna go back on stream. Thank you,
You will
YouTube,
be
watching.
provided a
I'm
copy
gonna
of
cut
the
it
jury
here.
Instructions and the exhibits introduced as evidence.
Alright, Twitch.
Will be made
Now we're
available
just
to
twitching.
you. Prior
No
to
more
beginning your
YouTube.
deliberations, you will need to select one of you.
I wanted to make a
act as
YouTube video.
That person will preside over your deliberations and will speak
Actually, I might
to the
keep some
jury
of this in
here
here.
in court. Forms of verdict have been prepared for your use. You will take these forms to the jury room when you have reached a unanimous agreement as to your verdict.
Time for the jury to
The foreperson
deliberate.
will sign the forms which express your verdict. You will then return all forms of verdict, these instructions, and any exhibits to the courtroom. There are 12 that deliberate. There are 4 alternates on this jury, given the long length of this jury. Keeping with the privacy, I'm going to pass.
Are they showing the
this
juries?
instruction,
Oh, attorneys.
down.
Wait, does that
with,
say juries?
The help of Ryan, you're going to
Media
look. This is one of your
attorneys.
names,
That better not be the
and you
jury.
are
No, it's not.
one of the alternates. What I'm going to ask.
That'd be against the law showing the attorney
bailiff to do
or jury.
is to first take the alternates out.
We
so
show
they
the
can get
jury.
their
It's against the law.
belongings. And I'm going to ask you to meet me down at the end of the hallway to explain. I hate to tell alternates they're alternates because they've been paying so close to the evidence, and so just to talk with you, and then and thank you, and then
No, it's gonna take a while. Unless they like are.
on your clip will
If
be.
they make a decision right now, it's
the
gonna be
jurors
guilty.
themselves. Okay, and the jurors will go into the room. So I'll need the aid of both of them. But first, let me pass this piece of paper over to you. Look down here. There's 4 names. See if one of them is yours, and you're an.
You know they're gonna argue, so it's gonna take a while. Some people are gonna be like, "Nah, she's not guilty." Some people are like, "She's guilty." So there's gonna be some arguing. It's gonna take a while till they come up with something. That's why they got second lesser charges. Charges that are not as serious. Just so they can all agree and find something.
It's at the bottom.
So she'll be convicted of something no matter what. She's gonna be convicted of something no matter what. Probably the lesser charge. Not manslaughter, but the negligence. She's for sure getting charged with negligence. Like, come on.